Before this video begins, I would like to give a quick thank you to my Asban Team level patrons Fallon Cortez and Nathan Gibson. Thank you so much for supporting the channel. Somehow, Moffat returned. Yes, recently we were graced, or cursed, with the earth-shattering news that Steven Moffat has returned to Doctor Who, being announced as a writer for the upcoming Series 14. This is already serving as a pretty controversial turn of events, because for the last 14 years Moffat has been a pretty polarising name amongst the Doctor Who community. Some worship him as a screenwriting god, others think he killed Doctor Who. I myself have a pretty complex relationship with Moffat's work, and I definitely have strong opinions on the wider cliquish feeling of current Doctor Who. But against all odds, and at risk of triggering Twitter, I actually think Moffat's return is a good thing for the show in the long run. So rather than contributing to the many videos and tweets about how Moffat's return will destroy Doctor Who, let's look at it from a different, more positive perspective. Okay, so mere days after Doctor Who announced its May return with a short but sweet trailer, it was announced that the iconic Steven Moffat is making his return to write episode 3 of Series 14. This had been heavily rumoured for a long time now, whether that be people simply joking about him coming back or actual semi-leaks. According to showrunner Russell T Davies, Moffat was the second writer he approached after returning to his position in charge of Doctor Who. Chibnall was apparently the first, but turned down the chance to return, and you know what, I can't blame him after everything he had to deal with during his era of the show. Of course, if you somehow don't know who Steven Moffat is, he's a hugely prominent Doctor Who writer, having written at least one episode every series from 2005 to 2017, 48 episodes by my count. This makes him by far the most seasoned writer of modern Doctor Who, so naturally people feel very strongly about his work. Moffat's work is known for witty humour, genre hybridisation, and complex plots with lots of twists, and sex jokes. A lot of sex jokes. Anyway, let's delve into some of the reasons why fans aren't happy about Moffat's return. I think the main point of contention for a lot of people is the idea that Doctor Who has this clique of sorts, the same people always orbiting the show. This is something I myself have criticised, specifically with the current era bringing back a lot of the cast and crew from Series 4. So obviously Moffat's return compounds that. I mean, think of it this way. We have Russell T Davies as showrunner, with Julie Gardner, Jane Tranter and Phil Collinson as producers and Murray Gold as composer. That alone creates an uneasy atmosphere of things being a nostalgia act. So adding in Moffat as a writer makes that feeling even more significant, especially because it means we're set for a run of 20, yes, 20 episodes, all written by just 3 guys. Which is pretty crazy when you think about it. Obviously there's some co-writers in there, but I think you get my point. And like I said, I have been a vocal critic of this reunion act approach, but I don't actually think Moffat's return is that bad. It's by far the least concerning part of this production clique. And okay, I won't beat around the bush. One of the other main reasons people aren't happy about Moffat's comeback is his pretty bad reputation as a showrunner. Like, I know people like to do some good old revisionist history when it comes to his era, but Moffat's time in charge of Doctor Who, particularly the Capaldi era, was pretty heavily criticised by a lot of fans. He was public enemy number 1, until Chris Chibnall came along and everyone decided he was the one killing Doctor Who, and that Moffat was some kind of sweet angel who had never done anything wrong. But my point is that the fanbase still bears scars, if you will, from the Moffat Civil War, if you could even call it that. His time as showrunner was very polarising, with extremely dedicated fans and equally dedicated detractors, so his name still sparks a lot of debates and heated discussions, meaning his return in Series 14 brings back some bad memories for a lot of the people who didn't enjoy his 7-year stint in charge of the whole show. But it's important to remember the many hits of Steven Moffat. When people criticise Moffat, it's for things like Clara Who, making the first Doctor sexist, the existence of Missy, or the character writing of companions and their relationships with the Doctor. But when it comes to sheer individual stories and narratives, Moffat is unparalleled in his success. In 2023, for the 60th anniversary, Doctor Who magazine ran a poll to determine the most popular TV stories for every Doctor. At the end, there was a top 10 for the most popular stories of the entire show's history. Guess who appears 5 times in that top 10? That's right, Stevie Moff. Hell, the Grand Moff himself sits comfortably with the 2 top stories on that list, both from his time as showrunner, proving that he's capable of writing absolute masterpieces on an incredibly regular basis. Rolled enough in time, The Doctor Falls is widely considered one of the best finales of the whole show, and Heaven Sent is, of course, an underrated hidden gem. Obviously, not all of his episodes are perfect, he has his fair share of stinkers, but if you want to get someone to come in and write a Doctor Who banger, he's the one you call. Besides, most criticism of Moffat stems from his decisions as the showrunner, their head honcho. A lot of fans tend to suggest that Moffat was at his best during series 1 to 4 when he was answering to Davis as showrunner, helping to rein in some of Moffat's more out there ideas, especially because he wouldn't be the one dealing with all the big story arcs. A former showrunner or notable writer returning to Doctor Who after a long absence is pretty unprecedented in the modern show. Obviously, we've now had the double whammy of both Davis and Moffat returning, which has taken fans by surprise. But it's important to remember that Classic Who saw returning writers, and there was no controversy then. Robert Wholmes was, and still is, often considered as one of the best Doctor Who writers in the show's long history. Most fans would probably put him on their Mount Rushmore of Doctor Who writers, and for very good reason. He's credited for the first appearances of iconic monsters like the Autons, the Master and the Centaurans, along with writing beloved stories like The Ark in Space, Pyramids of Mars, The Brain of Morbius, The Deadly Assassin and The Talons of Weng Chiang. That's a pretty damn impressive resume. Of course, Holmes had his own fair share of stinkers, mainly at the start with the Crotons and the Space Pirates, but on the whole, he had a really good batting average, and he was script editor during the absolute height of Classic Who's popularity. If it wasn't for Holmes, the 4th Doctor era likely would have never been as successful as it was. Anyway, to explain why this is all relevant to old Stevie boy over here, Holmes left Doctor Who in 1978, only to come back 6 years later to write The Case of Androzani, widely considered the best 5th Doctor story. He did go on to write the less successful 2 Doctors and the Mysterious Planet, before inconveniently keeling over dead while writing The Ultimate Foe. I mean, come on, it's a bit rude, isn't it? But jokes aside, Holmes is proof that there's no strict rule saying you can never return to the show. It's not like Moffat is becoming showrunner again, he's just writing another one-off story. We don't even know if he'll continue after that. Although he has been rumoured to be writing the 2024 Christmas special, but I digress. If Moffat has a good enough story, he also has the portfolio and track record to be allowed to write it for the show. I think a lot of the issues stem from this idea some fans have of the show needing to constantly change. There's almost this expectation for Series 14 to be a complete fresh start, and I would admit that the production team has kind of been feeding into that with the creative decisions to rebrand it as Season 1 and essentially treat the 15th Doctor as the first of a new lineage. However, I don't think it's necessary to completely overhaul the writer's room. People like to point to 2005 Series 1 as a fresh start, but it wasn't really. Literally every writer in that series had contributed to some sort of expanded media production, whether that be a novel, an audio story, or a short story. It wasn't like they brought in a bunch of unknown, up-and-coming writers because they wanted guaranteed success. People who knew the show and had experience writing in that style. I'm not sure where this idea has come from that Doctor Who needs to be some sort of proving ground for writers. It's never really been like that. In the past, Doctor Who has been a launchpad for writers, but that's an exception, not the rule. With a show like this, you want the very best. You want people like Neil Gaiman, Richard Curtis, Toby Whithouse and Matthew Graham, immensely talented and decorated writers outside of Doctor Who. And of course, Moffat is one such writer himself, so it's hard to see his return as a truly bad thing when he can get the best out of Doctor Who. I think Doctor Who actively needs someone like Moffat right now. Much like Series 1 all those years ago, the show really has to make the best first impression to get things back on track. The fans need the familiarity and safe hands of the writers they know and trust, whilst the new viewers need the best possible first exposure to the show. I really don't see much of a problem with the idea of Davis and Moffat serving as these positive gatekeepers in a sense, giving viewers the ideal introduction with the highest quality scripts. It's a net positive thing for the show's future. Of course, steps do need to be taken to ensure we do get some fresh faces writing episodes, not necessarily unknown writers entirely, but simply fresh faces to Doctor Who specifically. That's something the Chibnall era did really well. It didn't perpetuate the cycle of same writers every series. It tried to introduce some new regulars like Vinay Patel, Maxine Alderton and Pete McTighe, with Maxine Alderton by far the standout success of these newcomers. I do think all this Moffat talk has distracted fans from the fact that Series 14 does have newcomers, namely Kate Herron and Brian E. Redman of Loki fame. And as of writing, there's still an unconfirmed name in that episode 5 slot that could be another newcomer for all we know. Just because Moffat has come back doesn't mean he's taking opportunities away from anyone. I'm pretty sure Davis has already stated that Series 15 will have a more varied and diverse writers' room, so it's not like it's going to be Davis, Moffat, Mark Gatiss, etc. like a lot of fans are suggesting. There's still a lot of potential for newer names to come through, and even Mike Flanagan has gone on record to say writing for Doctor Who would be a dream come true. So the show is still an attractive prospect to some really big, notable writers. Steven Moffat isn't a perfect writer. Nobody would ever claim he is, but he's by far one of the best to ever write for Doctor Who. He has such a strong grasp on the core foundational tenets of the franchise, and he's a very experimental writer who loves to push Doctor Who to its limits. I understand why his return is disappointing for a lot of fans because of his reputation, but a lot of people seem to forget or overlook how talented he truly is. As I've already mentioned, if you want to make Series 14 this big soft reboot relaunch thing, you want to bring in the most reliable talented names like Moffat for the short-term success, before transitioning to newer names in the long term. I don't expect Moffat to be writing a story every series. I think he's just going to drop a few bangers and then ride back off into the sunset. Like Classic Who showed, it doesn't have to be over forever when you leave. You can still come back and that's perfectly okay. Of course, it's understandable for some fans to perceive this as Moffat denying another, hungrier writer a place in the lineup, but I don't think that's really his fault. It's an 8-episode series, there's only so many spaces available, it's a very short series in Doctor Who terms. The wider nostalgia bait of the second Davis era is concerning, I've said that since the beginning, but Moffat's return at least has the potential to showcase the best of Who right from the start of Series 14. There's the 2-episode premiere, and then the week after, boom, it's a Moffat classic. What better way to get new fans into the show? I'm by no means a Moffat fanboy. I've famously made videos about my dislike of Series 5, which is a hugely controversial take, but I massively respect the writer and his great track record. So as funny as his return is to meme, because everyone's coming back, I think Moffat's return specifically is what the show really needs. And there really isn't anything wrong with that. I mean, just look at everyone always saying, watch Blink as an introduction to Doctor Who. That was a long time ago. We can now have a new version of that. Of course, it will become a problem if he sticks around every series and the other members of the New Who Boys Club come back, but any talk of that would just be baseless speculation. I'm massively looking forward to seeing what Moffat has cooked up for the new era and the new Doctor. But what about you? Are you excited for the return of the Grand Moff? Or do you think it's a step back for the show? Let me know in the comments. I hope you liked this video, and as always, I'll see you in the next one. Bye bye. And an extra special thank you to my Asbantium level patrons, Fallon Cortez and Nathan Gibson, my Diamond level patron, Glenna Clark, my Platinum level patrons, Matthew Burns and Maximilian Foreman, and all my Gold level patrons, Daniel Shillito, Francois Nako Line Vortex, Lee Marie Farrell, Thomas R, and Thomas Price. Thank you so much for your support.